All right, so imagine this. Okay, it's late. You're at a Denny's, three guys, some coffee, and this isn't the start of a bad joke.
Or maybe it is, depending on how you see NVIDIA's early days, right?
Maybe. But seriously, we're talking about Nvidia, the tech giant. What were they doing at a Denny's?
Well, that Denny's is actually where it all began. Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Prime, those guys huddled over coffee. They went on to found NVIDIA.
Wow, really? No way. From greasy spoons to silicon empires, that's quite a leap.
It really is. Back then, they weren't dreaming of billion-dollar valuations. They were just hungry to change the world of computer graphics.
And to think, this was back in the late 90s, right? The wild west of PC gaming. Weren't there a ton of companies trying to make it big back then?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking 70-plus companies all vying for a piece of that gaming graphics pie. It was a cutthroat time to be in tech, that's for sure.
So how did Nvidia go from those humble beginnings to becoming, well, Nvidia?
Well, it wasn't exactly a straight shot to the top. They had some early missteps, almost got knocked out entirely, even.
Oh, really? I always thought they were this unstoppable force. Tell me more about these missteps.
It all comes down to their very first graphics card, the NV1. They took a gamble on a new technology, quadrilateral primitives for rendering graphics. Problem was, the rest of the industry was moving towards triangle primitives.
Well, on quadrilateral versus triangle, what's the big deal?
Think of it like building blocks. NVIDIA was trying to build a house with squares when everyone else was using triangles. Just wasn't going to hold up.
Ouch. Yeah, it sounds like a pretty fundamental miscalculation. So what happened?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. They'd bet big on this NV1 tech being the thing for the Sega Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Now, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. A console ahead of its time, some might say.
It was, but unfortunately for NVIDIA, that bet on the wrong tech, it backfired. The NV1, and by extension the Dreamcast, didn't take off the way they had hoped.
So they were left with a console that wasn't selling and a graphics card nobody wanted. That's got to be tough to recover from.
You'd think so, right? And to make matters worse, this was around the same time that NVIDIA was running seriously low on cash, like 30 days from going out of business. Low?
Oh, wow, that is seriously low. So what happened? Did Sega just cut them loose?
Here's where it gets wild. Sega's president at the time, Shoichiro Irimajiri, he saw something in NVIDIA, even after that NV1 mishap, convinced Sega to give them their last $5 million.
$5 million to a company on the verge of collapse. Talk about a gamble.
More than a gamble, some would say it was an act of faith, but that $5 million, it ended up being NVIDIA's saving grace.
That is incredible. So they're down to the wire, pressure's on. What did they do with this lifeline?
They went all in on a new graphics card, the RVA 128 this time, using those all-important triangle primitives, and you know what? It worked.
The RVA 128, wasn't that the card that really put them on the map?
It was. Launched in 1997, and within just 4 months, they sold 1 million units. From there was no looking back. NVIDIA was back in the game, and this time, they were here to stay.
Okay, so the RVA 128 was a hit. They're back from the brink. What's next for NVIDIA? Do they just ride that wave and see where it takes them?
Not quite. See, NVIDIA, they've always had bigger ambitions. They weren't content with just being a player. They wanted to be the player to dominate the market.
And how do you go from comeback kid to market dominator?
Through a series of very strategic acquisitions. They had this knack for spotting opportunities, for seeing the bigger picture, and weren't afraid to make bold moves.
So they were on the hunt for companies to acquire, like a tech version of Monopoly, gobbling up everything in sight.
Kind of, but it was more than just buying up the competition. They were looking for companies that could give them a specific edge, fill in gaps in their portfolio, or even open up entirely new markets.
Okay, so who are some of their biggest targets?
Well, remember 3DFX? They were the big dogs in graphics cards before NVIDIA burst onto the scene.
Yeah, they were the ones to beat back in the day. Didn't last long, though, did they?
Nope. In 2000, NVIDIA acquired them, absorbed the technology, their talent, basically took out a major competitor in one fell swoop.
Wow, talk about adding insult to injury. From rivals to just another asset. That's got to sting if you're a 3DFX engineer.
It's the cold reality of the tech world, I'm afraid. But it was a brilliant strategic move for NVIDIA. And that was just the beginning.
There are more. Who else did they go after?
Well, in 2008, they set their sights on a company called Agia.
Agia. Rings a bell, but I can't quite place it.
They were the masterminds behind the physics engine. You know,
Yeah.
the tech that made games look and feel more realistic.
Oh, right. Like explosions with debris flying everywhere, clothes moving naturally, stuff like that.
Exactly. Physics added a whole new layer of immersion to gaming, and NVIDIA recognized that. So they scooped up Agia, integrated physics into their GPUs, and suddenly they were offering something their competitors couldn't match.
Smart move, especially with gaming becoming more and more demanding, visually speaking.
Absolutely. But they weren't just focused on making games prettier. Remember when mobile phones really started taking off?
Oh yeah, back when flip phones were all the rage.
Well, in 2011, Nvidia made a move that would foreshadow their future in a big way. They acquired a company called Icera.
Icera.
Never heard of them. They specialized in baseband chips, a crucial component for mobile phones to connect to cellular networks.
Ah, so they were already thinking about how people would experience computing on the go, not just at their desks.
Exactly. They were ahead of the curve in that sense. And then there's Mellanox Technologies, probably one of their most significant acquisitions, especially in light of where they are today.
Mellanox. Okay, that one does sound familiar, but I'm drawing a blank. Refresh my memory.
They were the kings of high-performance computing, specifically the kind of networking tech that's essential for data centers.
Data centers, right? And data centers are kind of a big deal these days, what with the whole AI explosion happening.
Exactly. By acquiring Mellanox in 2019, Nvidia was positioning themselves to be a major player in not just data centers, but the world of AI as well.
Wow, so they were already laying the groundwork for their AI dominance years in advance.
Precisely. And, all those acquisitions, all that risk-taking, it culminated in a pretty audacious move in 2020.
Let me guess, another acquisition.
Yeah, you know it. Remember that $5 million lifeline Sega gave them? Well, they were ready to put down a cool $40 billion to acquire ARM Holdings.
ARM Holdings, the company that designs the chips that power, 90% of the world's smartphones?
The one and only. This was Nvidia making a play to not just be a part of the mobile world, but potentially to control a huge chunk of it.
Wow, that's massive.
That's
So what happened? Did they pull it off?
Not quite. Governments around the world, especially in the US and the UK, got pretty worried about the potential impact on competition. Imagine if one company had that much control over the chips that power pretty much everything these days.
Yeah, I can see why that would raise some eyebrows.
After a lot of back and forth, the deal ultimately fell through in 2022.
Wow, so close, yet so far.
Ah.
From near bankruptcy to almost buying one of the most important companies in tech, that's quite a journey.
That's Nvidia for you. They've always been bold, always been willing to push the boundaries. But all those acquisitions, all those near misses, they were just setting the stage for what was to come. The AI revolution was about to begin, and Nvidia was about to take center stage.
Okay, so we've talked about NVIDIA, going from scrappy startup to gaming giant and then making these big power moves in data centers and AI. But what was that turning point where they became the AI company, the one everyone's talking about, the one worth trillions?
Well, they were definitely in the right place at the right time. But it's more than just luck, right? They had this vision and this software platform that really changed the game. CUD.
CD. Okay, I got to be honest, I haven't heard that name before. What's so special about it?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know the name, but they've definitely felt its impact. See, NVIDIA was known for GPUs, those things that made them famous for gaming, right?
Right, makes sense.
Well, GPUs are basically parallel processing powerhouses. Perfect for AI, actually, but before CEDA came along, trying to use them for AI, it was like, I don't know, trying to write a novel in a foreign language using only a picture dictionary.
Okay, interesting analogy. So where does CEDA fit in?
CUDA was like handing developers a whole phrasebook, a grammar guide, the Rosetta Stone for AI on GPUs. It made it so much easier to actually use all that parallel processing power for things like depth learning. And here's the kicker. NVIDIA made CUDA open for developers to use and adapt.
So they were practically giving away the keys to the kingdom. Sounds like a risky strategy.
Yeah. It was a gamble that paid off big time. By making CUDA open, they weren't just building a powerful tool, they were building a whole ecosystem. And when we're talking about ecosystems, we got to mention their DGX supercomputers.
Oh yeah, those I've definitely heard of. Those are the systems used by all the big names in AI, right?
Yeah.
Google, OpenAI, that whole crowd.
You got it. Picture a system that's tailor-made for AI, packed with NVIDIA's absolute top-tier GPUs, optimized to the max for all those heavy-duty deep learning tasks. That's DGX. And they didn't just stop at raw power. They made them surprisingly user-friendly for researchers and developers.
So they were making it easier and faster for the biggest players in AI to push the boundaries of what was possible.
Yeah.
Smart.
Exactly. And there's a fun little anecdote that I think really speaks volumes about the impact NVIDIA had on the AI world. Remember Tesla?
Yeah.
The electric car company?
Yeah, Elon Musk's other big venture. What about them?
Well, Tesla, they used to be one of NVIDIA's biggest customers for AI chips. They relied on them for all their self-driving tech.
Right, I think I remember reading about that. But didn't Tesla eventually start making their own AI chips?
Exactly. And that's the thing. Tesla, a company known for, wanting to do everything themselves, saw the value that Nvidia created, saw how far ahead they were, and decided it was worth building their own hardware from scratch.
Wow, that's like the ultimate form of flattery, isn't it? Being so good that you force your competitor to build their own in-house solution just to keep up.
Right. And all this innovation, all these strategic moves, they culminated in a pretty remarkable moment back in 2024. Remember when Nvidia briefly became the most valuable company in the world?
Oh yeah, that was huge news. I think even people who don't usually follow the stock market were talking about it.
And for good reason. It was a clear sign that Nvidia wasn't just riding the AI wave, they were driving it. The demand for their H100 chips, the brains behind those DGX systems we talked about, it went through the roof as companies were basically tripping over themselves to get ahead in the AI game.
So from a Denny's booth to the top of the tech world, it's quite a story. But where do they go from here? They've pretty much conquered everything they've set their minds to. What's next for a company like Nvidia?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But if their history is anything to go by, they're not going to rest on their laurels. They've got their sights set on even bigger things, software platforms, robotics, virtual collaboration. They want to be more than just a hardware company. They want to be the operating system for the future, not just for computers, but for how we live, work, interact with the world.
And that's what makes Nvidia such a fascinating company to follow. They're not just building technology, they're shaping the future. Whether that future is exciting or a little bit unnerving, well, that's for each of us to decide. But one thing's for sure, with a company like Nvidia at the helm, it's going to be one heck of a ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that's our deep dive into the world of NVIDIA. Hopefully you learned something new today, and maybe, just maybe, you have a new appreciation for the company behind those graphics cards and the huge impact they're having on the tech that's shaping our world. Thanks for joining us.